She blew a whistle in my pool, like she owned the place, and called me the guest? Oh, Karen, you picked the wrong backyard. Karen held swim lessons in my pool. Then I showed her I'm not in the HOA. Part 1, the whistle and the weight of memory. She was blowing a whistle, giving commands to toddlers in swim floaties, right there in the pool where I once held my father's hand as he slipped away. That was the same spot where he whispered, "Keep this land safe, no matter what." And now, that land, that memory, had a stranger stomping around it like she owned it. I stood behind the lattice fence, bag of groceries digging into my arm, breath caught somewhere between grief and fury. The sun was burning down, but all I felt was cold. Not the kind that comes with shade or water, but the kind that slithers into your gut when something sacred is being trampled. For a second, just 1 second, I thought maybe I was wrong, that maybe grief had blurred reality, made me paranoid. Maybe she had a right to be there. Maybe I'd missed some email or flyer or something. But then I saw it. My yellow Adirondack chair. The same one that's leaned crooked ever since the last storm. Still cracked, still crooked, still mine. That chair had never left this soil. Just like me. Just like my father before me. And yet, there she was, whistle in mouth, hands slicing the air, commanding a bunch of kids like some clipboard-wielding dictator. Every splash, every squeal sounded like an insult to everything this land ever stood for. I didn't move, didn't speak, not yet. She hadn't seen me, or maybe she had and just didn't care. She was too busy shouting instructions, like she was running a suburban boot camp. And my pool, my water, was her stage. Part 2, the Adirondack chair and the lie that shattered. The heat shimmered off the concrete like waves off asphalt. But inside me, there was no summer, just a bitter chill. The kind that settles in your bones when something that once felt sacred now feels violated. For a flicker of a moment, I actually questioned my own memory, wondered if maybe I had misunderstood, if grief had twisted my logic, made me paranoid. Had I misread the situation? Was this somehow allowed? But then, I saw it. That chair. My yellow Adirondack, faded, cracked, still slouching to the left from the last storm. It had been there for years. Watched storms roll in. Watched birthdays, barbecues, arguments. Grief. That chair. Remembered things. And in that moment, so did I. This wasn't a shared space. It wasn't a neighborhood amenity or whatever excuse she was about to make up. This was mine. And yet, there she stood, Karen, sunglasses perched high, clipboard tucked under one arm, commanding her little swim squad like a suburban general. The whistle around her neck wasn't for safety, it was for control. It didn't say, caution. It said, obey. Each shrill blow, each shout across the pool, tore into me like static ripping through a symphony. She wasn't just teaching them how to float. She was performing dominance, performing ownership, and the kids, they were just props in her power play. Even from behind the fence, I could hear her voice, that tone, that smug, overly polite tone, polished by years of PTA meetings and HOA board votes, the kind of tone that wears pearls and smiles while it takes what isn't hers. And right then, I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was theft, wrapped in sunscreen and fake community spirit. Part 3, the gravel path and the truth buried in the soil. So I walked. Down the gravel path my grandfather laid, stone by stone, with bare hands and a tired back. Back when this land still whispered freedom, and no one dared to claim what wasn't theirs. Each step crunched beneath me. But the real noise was inside my chest. This wasn't just property. This wasn't just a pool. This was promise. A vow I had made to a man who built more with silence than most do with speeches. A man who raised me under the shade of old pecan trees and war stories told without bitterness. When I reached the pool gate, I didn't speak. I waited. And still. She didn't even look my way. Karen was too busy demonstrating a backstroke to a little boy in Spider-Man floaties like she was hosting the Olympics in my backyard. So I let the silence grow. Let it stretch between us like a taut wire, waiting to snap. Eventually, she turned, saw me, but only just. She scanned me like I was a stray leaf blown in from another yard. Not a person, not an owner, just an inconvenience. I asked, "What are you doing here?" She adjusted her sunglasses. That smug smile curled across her lips like it had practiced this moment in the mirror. "Oh, didn't the HOA tell you?" she chirped. "I'm hosting community swim lessons. They said it was totally fine. You must be the new tenant." Tenant? That word hit harder than it should have. I took a breath. "This isn't a community pool," I said. "This is private property." "Mine." She tilted her head, like a confused golden retriever, only meaner. Then she laughed and said the line that made my jaw tighten. "Well, if you've got a problem, take it up with the board." The board. There was no board. There was no HOA. Not for this land. That's the very reason my grandfather chose this plot. Far away from the reach of rules written by people who never lifted a shovel or felt the weight of real responsibility. Part 4. No board, no HOA, no permission. I looked her dead in the eye and said it again, slower this time, like I was speaking to someone who refused to hear, "I'm not in your HOA. This is not shared property. This is private. You are trespassing." The air tensed, stretched like a rubber band pulled to its limit. But she didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just turned her back to me, blew that whistle again, and kept barking swim instructions like I didn't exist. And that was the moment something inside me broke free. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It wasn't just about some clipboard crusader pretending she had power. It was about every time someone had tried to make me feel small, every time I had swallowed my words, every time I had let someone speak over me, dismiss me, reduce me. The grief of losing my father, the ache of carrying this land alone, the tired silence I had been living in, all of it rose up like a tide I didn't even know I was holding back. But I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I turned and walked away, quiet, but resolved, because I knew what had to happen next, and it wasn't going to include whistles, pool noodles, or Karen. Part 5, the deed, and the paper war. I walked straight into the house. No pause, no second thoughts. Went to the old cedar box tucked beneath my father's bookshelf, the one that still smelled like pine and smoke and years gone by. Inside, the deed. His handwriting. Still steady. Still strong. The ink had faded slightly with time, but the weight of it, unchanged. I traced the boundary lines with my finger, felt every turn of that fence in my bones. This wasn't just land. It was carved out with intention, outside of HOA jurisdiction, out of reach from clipboard tyrants and self-declared neighborhood monarchs. My grandfather made sure of that, 50 years ago. I grabbed the deed, the parcel map, and drove straight to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the counter was kind, but firm. The kind of person who'd seen every scam, every land grab in the book. She pulled up my record, scrolled for a moment. Then, looked up at me and said, "You're not in the HOA. Never have been. Their reach stops 5 parcels down." I nodded, tried to let that truth settle in my chest, but she wasn't done. She clicked again, printed a page, and handed it to me. "This might interest you." I scanned the paper and froze. 2 years ago, a name sat printed in bold near the bottom, Karen Lell. She had filed a petition to annex my property under HOA oversight. She had tried before. It had been reviewed, stamped, rejected, and now she was back, pretending it had gone through. She wasn't confused. She was bold. She was entitled. And she was wrong. Part 6. Cameras, locks, and her next move. I went home. Didn't even take off my shoes, grabbed the toolkit, dragged the old ladder out of the barn, pulled the trail cameras from storage. One by one, I installed them. Every angle of the pool deck, the side gate, the patio beam, the garden fence. I mounted a monitor inside the kitchen window. A quiet sentinel. Always watching. Then I added a new lock to the pool gate, steel reinforced, keyed from both sides. By sundown, my backyard wasn't just a sanctuary anymore. It was a fortress. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being prepared. And it turns out, I didn't have to wait long. The following weekend, it happened again. I woke to laughter, high-pitched, joyful, uninvited. Then, that sound, the whistle, piercing, familiar, unwelcome. I rushed to the monitor. There she was, Karen, back like nothing had changed. This time, she brought even more kids, more gear, and a sign. "Community swim class, free for residents." I stared at the screen, jaw clenched, heart pounding. She had brought a stepladder, used it to climb over the newly locked gate, like the lock meant nothing, like I meant nothing. I stepped outside, phone in hand, and walked toward her. She didn't stop, just yelled at the kids to keep practicing, told one of them to stop whining. "Unless you want to sit out," she snapped. That was it. I told her to leave. She told me to stop harassing her. I said I had county documents proving the truth. She waved her hand, told me she had HOA bylaws. I told her she was trespassing. She said, "Then I'm calling the police." I didn't blink. "Go ahead," I said, and she did. Part 7. The sheriff and the whistle that fell silent. 15 minutes later, the sound of tires on gravel broke the heat. A sheriff cruiser rolled up to the curb, lights flashing, lazily, like it was just another routine call on a slow Saturday. Karen marched toward him, clipboard in one hand, smugness in the other. She pointed at me, like I was the criminal. "He's interfering with a community program," she said, "trying to intimidate me. And the children." Her voice dripped with fake concern, like she was the hero of a summer movie. And I was the grumpy old villain who hated joy. The sheriff looked at her, then looked at me. I said nothing, just handed him 3 things. The deed, the county rejection letter, and the parcel map with my boundary line circled in red. He read in silence, 1 page at a time. His eyes narrowed. Then he let out a slow breath. "Ma'am," he said, "you're on private property. This is not under HOA jurisdiction." Karen blinked. "No, there must be a mistake," she stammered. "I submitted the petition. It should have—" "It was denied," the sheriff interrupted. 2 years ago. There's a record of it." And that was it. The shift. I saw it in her face. That tiny crack in the mask. Gone was the clipboard queen. Gone was the performance. What replaced it was disbelief, followed by rage. She didn't argue, didn't apologize. She just snapped her whistle off her neck, grabbed her tote bag, and stormed out, children trailing behind like ducklings, confused and quiet. But me? I stood there, silent, still, because I didn't need to say a word. This wasn't the end, but it was the turning point. She had crossed a line, and finally, someone with authority had drawn it back. Part 8, the flyers, and the false narrative. A few days passed. The backyard was still. No splashes, no whistles, no uninvited guests. Just the way it used to be. But peace never lasts long, not when people like Karen are involved. I was on my way to pick up fencing staples from the hardware store when I saw it, pinned to the community board. Bright yellow paper, cartoon drawings of happy kids splashing in a pool, big bold letters, pool for all. Restore access. Neighborhood unity starts with us. And there, at the bottom, Karen's name, her phone number, my address, my breath caught in my chest, not from anger, but from the sheer audacity of it. She hadn't retreated. She was reorganizing. I pulled the flyer down, folded it, tucked it into my back pocket like evidence, then walked next door, to the hardware aisle. 2 rolls of yellow caution tape, a metal sign that read, "Private property. No trespassing. Video surveillance in use." I went home. Marked every entry point around the pool, the gate, the steps, even the side garden. Then I taped a letter to the pool gate, addressed to her, by name. No threats, no insults. Just a clear warning. Any future unauthorized entry will be considered criminal trespass and reported immediately. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it in ink that meant business. I had given her silence. I had given her a chance. But now I was giving her the law. Part 9. Karen's desperation and my legal armor. The week rolled by. Quiet. Almost too quiet. I fixed the fence behind the tool shed, watered the basil, scraped the peeling paint off the barn door. But each time a car rolled by too slow. Each time a voice echoed just a little too long on the breeze. My shoulders tensed, not out of fear, not anymore, out of readiness. Then came Saturday. The sky was overcast, heavy, like it knew something was coming. Around noon, I heard it, tires crunching gravel. I peeked through the blinds. A silver SUV, Karen. Only this time, she wasn't alone. 2 men stepped out after her, matching polos, clipboards in hand. I stepped outside. Karen smiled like we were old friends. "Hey there," she chirped. "I brought a couple representatives from the HOA. Just clearing up a little confusion." One of them stepped forward, tried to hand me a packet of paper. I didn't take it. Instead, I asked them one question. "Have either of you read the sheriff's report or seen the county property records?" Karen stepped in before they could answer. "There's a precedent," she said. "A community expectation. We're all just trying to be neighborly." I turned to the 2 men. "This property is not under HOA jurisdiction. I have legal documentation, signed, sealed, and filed. Any further attempt to claim otherwise will be treated as harassment." One of them shifted uncomfortably. The other cleared his throat and asked if I'd consider attending an HOA meeting. I almost laughed. "Attend to discuss options," he said. I stared for a moment. Options. Like I was refusing to share a sandbox, instead of guarding sacred land. "I won't be attending any meetings," I said. "This isn't a discussion. It's legal fact." That's when Karen's smile cracked. "You're being unreasonable," she hissed. "You're turning the entire neighborhood against you." I met her glare without blinking. "You trespassed. You climbed my locked gate. You used my pool without permission, and I stayed silent. That was me being reasonable." They said nothing. So I pointed to the camera above the shed. Motion triggered. Every inch of this deck is recorded. Karen took a step back, arms folded, voice suddenly sharp. Well, I'm not finished. And I said, You already are. They left without a handshake. No waves, just tires spinning in gravel and muttering I didn't care to hear. I didn't follow. I just stood there. One hand resting on the post my grandfather set in the ground decades ago. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like strength. Part 10, The Forum, and the Power of Standing Still. It started with a flyer, pasted on every bulletin board in town, the grocery store, the coffee shop, even the feed supply co-op. Community forum topic, recreational access and property use Friday, 6 p.m., library hall, no names, no addresses. But in the bottom corner, a glossy stock photo of a backyard pool, one that looked a little too familiar. I didn't need to guess. I was the issue. Karen had gone public. Again. This time with backup. I called Josie. She didn't sound surprised. Don't engage, she said. Let me handle the legal. Prepare a written statement if you want, Badessa, now, but don't let them bait you into debate. She was right. But I wasn't staying home. I wasn't going to let Karen speak for me while I disappeared from my own story, so I showed up. 5 minutes early. Wearing my grandfather's old ranch coat, hair tied back, same braid he used to compliment when I was 10. I sat in the back row. Didn't speak, didn't wave, just watched. Karen took the stage, polished, poised. She spoke about unity, community strength, the importance of shared resources. Her voice carried like a practiced song, and then she started inviting others to speak, one by one. People stepped forward. Some looked genuinely concerned. Others, like they'd rehearsed every word. They spoke about kids, summer traditions, how one property shouldn't divide us. No one said my name, but almost every eye in the room drifted to where I sat, near the end. A man in a denim cap stood up. He asked a question, loud, clear. Is the landowner here tonight? Karen hesitated, so I stood. Didn't raise a hand, didn't say a word, just stood, faced them, nodded once, and sat back down. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Karen's voice stuttered. Her rhythm broke. The spell cracked. She finished quickly after that. No grand finale, no applause. Just rustling papers, murmurs, and chairs scraping tile. I didn't linger. I walked out alone. Boots hitting pavement in slow, steady beats. I didn't need to win the argument. I just needed them to see me. To know I wasn't an idea. Not a rumor. Not a locked gate. I was real. I was here. And I wasn't going anywhere. Part 11. The stillness after fire, and the warning in her silence. The next few days fell into a kind of hush. No more flyers, no strangers at the gate, no HOA letters tucked into my mailbox, just stillness, like the moment after a fire goes out, and the air still smells of smoke. I spent most of that week alone, walking the perimeter with my dog, checking each post, each wire, each brick my grandfather once laid. The pool was quiet. The land, heavy, but calm. It wasn't victory I felt. Not quite. It was something else. Something like a draw. Because I knew Karen. She wasn't gone. She was adjusting. She had seen me at the meeting. She had watched me stand. She hadn't expected that. She wanted a shadow, a rumor, an invisible problem to rally against. But I was none of those things. I was real, and that shook her. Still, I didn't relax. Instead, I built a second fence hidden behind the first, taller, stronger, no footholds. I added more motion lights, adjusted the camera angles, secured the perimeter like I was bracing for another storm. Because this wasn't fear, it was finality. If she came back, there would be no second warnings. Sunday morning, I stood barefoot by the pool, cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, watching ripples shimmer under a quiet sky. And that's when I saw her, far off, at the edge of the public road, hands in her pockets, alone, no clipboard, no smile. She didn't move. Neither did I. We stared at each other, across the invisible line she once pretended didn't exist. Then, she turned and walked away. Gravel crunching beneath her feet, no words, no gestures, just distance. It was the last time I saw her. Part 12. The Real Victory and the Quiet That Stayed. After that day, the world around me didn't change overnight. The HOA meetings still happened, but my name never came up again. The flyers disappeared quietly. No more slow-driving cars, no more curious walkers pausing at my gate. The children never returned, and the pool was mine again. I cleaned it myself, swept away the leaves, scrubbed the tile, replaced the cracked filter cover Dad never got around to fixing. One afternoon, I swam, alone. For the first time in months, the water was cold, stealing the heat from my skin and the tension from my chest. I dove beneath the surface and let the silence hold me. It wasn't the kind of victory you shout about. It didn't come with a gavel or a headline. It wasn't a trophy. It was breathing without bracing, planting tomatoes, without watching the road, walking the property line, and not finding footprints where they didn't belong. Karen had taken things from me. Yes, time, peace, trust in the kindness of smiling strangers. But she hadn't taken the land. She hadn't taken the story, because I had reclaimed it. Step by step, page by page, Josie sent me one final envelope. Inside, a neat summary of every legal record filed, stamped, dated, archived. At the bottom, a note in her handwriting. You won the quiet way. I placed that page inside the cedar box, not because I needed proof, not anymore, but because it felt like closure. Not the kind that slams shut with drama, but the kind that folds into your bones and lets you finally exhale. Epilogue. Autumn. And the long exhale. Fall settled in like an old friend. The leaves by the barn turned copper, drifted gently down to rest on the stepping stones I used to follow barefoot as a child. I repainted the shed door, the one where my grandfather carved our family name. Each stroke of the brush felt like stitching shut an old wound. The trellis bloomed again. The shutters no longer creaked in the wind, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't check the cameras when I woke up. Not out of carelessness, but because I no longer flinched when the breeze changed. I kept the signs, kept the locks, kept the folder-marked evidence tucked away in the desk drawer, not from fear, from memory, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay. Stay standing. Stay rooted. Stay quiet. Even when everything around you demands a reaction. And on those rare mornings when the wind is just right, and the pool water lies still like glass, I can almost hear my father's voice again, soft, proud. You kept it safe.